Okay, so this is going to be a short video to look at how we calculate percentages of amounts. And what you really need to be confident about is what happens when you multiply and divide by a 10 or 100. So if we look at this chart, it helps us to remember. So if we're multiplying, then the digits are going to be moving to the left. We're multiplying by 10, they're going to move once. And if we're going to multiply by 100, they would move twice. And division will be the opposite. So it's going to divide by 10 will move one right, and 100 would mean a move right 2 places. So that's helpful. And we also should know that if we wanted to find 10%, what is 10% of 60, for instance, then what that means in terms of a sum is 60 multiplied by 10 and then divided by 100. Okay, and if we think about that, if we multiply by 10, it's going to move one place to the left, but then we're dividing by 100, so it's moving 2 places to the right. So if we put those two together, what's going to happen is that we're actually just doing the same thing as if we were dividing by 10. And that's something you maybe need to stop and think about. So finding 10% is the same as dividing by 10. Okay, we multiply by 10, we divide by 100, they cancel each other out, so we end up just doing 60 divided by 10, and it's always the same for 10%. So using that, we've also looked at the fact that if you're dividing by 10, the digits don't change, their position on the place value changes. So that should make our life easier. And we can say, well, let's just do a few. What is 10% of, so let's start with 50. And 10% of 50 would be 5. What is 10% of 120? So we could write this in, divide by 10 equals 5. Divide by 10 equals 12. And then let's go for a different number, 45 divided by 10, it would shift one place, so 45 is going to become 4.5. Okay, so in this respect, dividing by 10 or finding 10% should be very straightforward. So that's good. But of course, we need to be able to do other percentages. It's not always going to be 10%. So let's see how we can use that to help us to find other percentages. So let's get rid of that and that. And this time, let's look at some different percentages. So let's take a nice rounded amount. Let's go for 600. And so we know that 10% is going to equal 60. So from that, we should be able to find 5%, because that's just going to be 60. Let's put arrows like that. 60 divided by 2, which is going to give us 30. So if 10% is 60, 5% would be 30. What about 15%? Well, for 15%, we could just take 10% is 60, 5% is 30, and we could add them together so that 15% is 90. And so it goes on. So we can use that 10% to help us find other things. 20% is going to be 10% times 2. So that's 60 times 2, which is 120. So that's a very useful thing. If we know what 10% is, then we can use that to find 15, 20, 5, and so on. It's also quite useful to know about 50%. So 50% of 600 is just going to be 600 divided by 2, which is 300, because we know that 50% is a half. If 100% is everything, then 50% is half. Or we can write it like that. So 50% is easy for us to find. So what about 40%? Well, this we could find in two possible ways, couldn't we? Because we could say, well, we know 10% is equal to 60, so 40% is going to be 4 times 60, which is 240. But we could also, I'm going to come over to here, we could also say, well, I know 50% is 300, and I know that 10% is 60, so I could take 10% away from 50%, that's going to give me 40%, and I can take 60 from 300 and it's 240. So have a go at playing around with the numbers. It makes so much easier if you want to do mental maths to think about those 10%. Okay, I'm going to wipe this, but of course you can watch this again and take snapshots if you want to, because I want to look at one more thing. So we know that to find 10% we divide by 10. So what about if we wanted to find 1%? Well, 1% we know means 1 out of 100. And this 100 at the bottom is a division. So finding 1%, we're not dividing by 10, we're dividing by 100, which means we've got this move of 2 places. So taking our 600 again, we could say 1% of 600 is equal to 600 divided by 100, which is 6. And how's that going to help us? Well, if we want to work out more complicated percentages, such as maybe 12%, then we could think, well, 10% is 60, 1% is 6, I need another 1%, which is another 6, and then I can add those together, so I get 12%, is equal to 72.